was there and what it.
Yeah, Linda, I didn't think that that tech that you employed to get feedback from the audience had a chance of working, but it sure did.
So Jay, my experience is the same as yours. And I think it was like, oh, this isn't going to work. And then I saw it work at Big Arts and how well people, I liked it. I could do it. I was sitting, in row 5 from the back and everything's flying on the screens and all these older people are getting to the website and putting in their data and looking at it. So it was, maybe some technology has come of age. Let's put it that way. It worked. I thought it worked very well. And usually I think, oh, let's ask people and they're going, what are they going to say? And I think we got a lot of good information.
Yeah.
Well, then we have a permanent record of all that, right?
Yes, we do.
Oh.
We have an A recorded and B, we're going to take the data and give it to Sandy, to David, and whatever else. Whoever else.
Well, it is 9 o'clock. Maybe I'll wait a minute or two.
I am.
Hey, Sandy. Unless maybe.
Bob Walter is not coming today, Jay.
Yeah, right. I knew that.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to talk about the water park.
Hey.
Could be.
Do you know if Tony Lappy is going to be tuning in today?
I had not heard anything from Tony different, so I assumed he would be here. I don't see him up here.
We have a quorum, Jay. You can go forward.
Okay. All right. Well, I would like to welcome everyone to our April 11th panel meeting. We will start off with a roll call. Jay Brown is here. David Mintz.
He's here.
Linda Laird.
Is here.
Ann Brady.
Here.
Ken Gill.
Here.
Bruce McDonald.
Here.
Tony Lappy.
Is working his way in. It'll be a couple minutes.
Okay, but he is here. All right. John Jensen.
Here, Jay.
Tony Lappy.
He's working his way in.
Okay. Marguerite Maville. I guess Marguerite is, maybe she's just running a little bit late, and we saw Sandy Stillwell.
Here.
Okay, well, I knew Bob Walter was not going to be able to be here due to a conflict. Let's hope Marguerite will sign on in a minute or two. First order of business is approval of the March 14th minutes. Can I have a motion and a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion of the minutes?
Yeah.
All those in favor of approvals, raise hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, minutes are approved. Okay, first order of business. It looks like we have our Commissioner Kevin Ruane with us today again. Kevin, are you there?
I'm here, Jay. Good morning.
Good. Kevin, Thanks so much for joining us again and being part of our meeting. These updates you give us are very valuable and much, much appreciated. So the floor is yours for however long you want it.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. Good morning, all. Today's really, a couple of things I'll talk about. One, just the funding that we're anticipating from Tallahassee. Two, I'll talk about the various town hall meetings we're starting to have. And three, kind of just give an indication of things getting back to normal, if you will. So we have
Commissioner Ruane, could you just adjust your camera a little bit so we see your face? All we're seeing is the top of your head.
Any better?
Perfect.
Yes, good.
So as I'd indicated, what we've been trying to do is work with the House and the Senate. The Senate has mostly everything that we've asked for that could be utilized and funded this year. Senate's been really helpful through the process, and that not only includes our cost share that's required for the Sanibel Causeway, the Pine Island Causeway, and both beaches in Fort Myers Beach, both bridges in Fort Myers Beach, as well as all our traffic lights, all our stop signs, as well as all our street signs. So they've all been put in the Senate budget. Another $350 million is a catch-all for all things that could potentially we come across that we haven't identified separately. There's probably 5 pages of requests, and they all have appeared in the Senate budget. What requires right now is the House obviously to agree on those. We have been up to Tallahassee several times, as most of you know, and all the House representatives, including the Speaker and the approach chair, have indicated that they will work this out in what they call reconciling conference. So what happens is both put a budget in and they come together and reconcile what they agree to fund. I don't have any reason not to believe the things that we're going to fund or request that will be funded. The more important thing that the Senate would like, and I'm going to have to work really hard, not only with the task force, but with all members across the community, is they would like a 5-year, what's known as a CIP, or capital improvement program. They're looking for to fund us jobs and recovery and resiliency items that we could execute in a given year. So they don't want to give us $2 billion today if we're going to sit on the sidelines with $1.5 billion of it. They want us to say, what can we get done when? So give us a timeline of in 24, we could do these 7 projects. Here's the dollar amount. In 25, we could do these 9 projects. Here's the dollar amount, so on and so forth. So I will be working with across the board with all municipality leaders to make sure. So specifically, let's just talk about Captiva. Sanibel obviously needs to replace and repair all their transmission lines as a result of the storm to be able to obviously continue to move forward with the connection between Captiva and Sanibel. And although that's a lot of money, we certainly believe that that was consistent. Transmission lines throughout Lee County didn't necessarily fare well during the storm. They all breached at one point in time. Every connection we had to water didn't work. So that's pretty common, but what they're looking for is if they were going to fund the transmission lines and whatever dollar amount that we're requesting for obviously to augment Captiva's connection, what dollar amount would that be? And in what year realistically will that be done in? So they want to get a little bit more granular because obviously as they budget, most people in the budgeting world in government hate putting aside money in a budget and it not being utilized because it can't be utilized for any other capacity. So when you allocate money to any government entity, and we do it here in the county, we always challenge staff to make sure it's like building a house. You know, if it's going to take you 2 years and your contractor is going to need 50% in 24, you budget 50%. They need your other 50% in 25, you budget in 25. So Ben Albritton basically is second in charge. He's the incoming president. And the way the administration works right now is when you have a leadership position, you hold it for 2 years. So right now we have Kathleen Pasadomer, that is the president. She will be there for this year and for next year. Thereafter, Ben Albritton will be the president for 2 years thereafter. So for the next 3 years, if there's ever an opportunity for Southwest Florida to really come out and advocate for the funds, it's these 3 years. And we even have someone following Ben that obviously is strong to Southwest Florida. So we're in good shape on the Senate. And the Senate generally is much more aggressive in what they ask for. The House certainly goes through conservative issues. Right now, they're arguing over policy issues, not necessarily our funding requests. So that's not necessarily a concern I have. Just trying to explain.
Kevin, could I just for the audience, when you talk about transmission lines and connections, you're talking about sewer transmission lines for Captiva and Sanibel and for the rest of Lee County. I just wanted to make sure that people understood that. When
I apologize. So what?
No, you don't have to apologize. I just wanted people to understand that.
So what happened in Lee County during the storm is there's particular transmission lines and different connections that actually transmit the water actually from a plant to your faucet. It's really that simple. Think of a long pipe that it connects. Those transmission lines have breaches throughout Lee County. Every single part of Lee County had some type of failure when it came to water. So that is what we advocating for. David's right. Sanibel has $45 million in the request in their CIP to fix all the transmission lines. And that includes not only Sanibel, but obviously whatever island water needs to do. Because right now we have educated the legislators that whether it's a nonprofit or not, it is really irrelevant. We need water and everyone needs water. So whether it's potable water, whether it's wastewater, water basically is a commodity that doesn't matter who the provider is. We have a responsibility as Lee County to provide water throughout the entire system. So that's one of the challenges, obviously, that we have in any of the big asks that we need from the legislature is, okay, if we're going to give you $45 million, Sanibel, when will you actually fix the transmission lines? Will it be 24? Will it be 25? And if it's going to be part year, they'd rather fund $22.5 million for 24 and $22.5 million for 25. We've had great responses. I anticipate to be up in Tallahassee next week. For the last week, I think I'll have to go unless it gets extended to session. No one's indicating it is. Session ends the end of April. That's basically what session is. So we're in a good place. We find ourselves to be exactly where we'd like to be. We think funding is and allocation for funding from the Senate has been exactly what we requested. Senator Martin's done a great job, obviously from the local delegation. And I've had assurances from the House across the board. So that's that situation as best as I could describe it. The second situation I wanted to bring everyone up to date is obviously we were awarded $1.1 billion in housing grants from HUD. They're called Community Block Development Grants. And we were giving an award given out by the federal government, given directly to Lee County, but they actually have to go through a formal process where they register that award in the registry. And then basically that'll take 60 days. And then we'll actually get a letter confirming the dollar amounts. As a byproduct of those dollars that we receive, we're required to have a very open public engagement with the community. Through the task force that I head up, and people like Sandy that are heading up branches are with us today. Those town hall meetings are going to take place throughout Lee County. There's a schedule on resilientlee.com. There's going to be 13 separate town hall meetings. There'll be a town hall meeting in every community to talk about obviously what this looks like and the requirements that we have. We want to hear your input. This is really the recovery about you, the constituent, not me. I just get to advocate for things that we look for and we continue to do. Again, great shape there. This is really the whole purpose of the town hall meetings is Washington, D.C. said that our requirement or a needs assessment was $1.1 billion. As we go through this town hall process, and it could go to as many as 16 town hall meetings, 13 are scheduled at the moment. If we demonstrate that our unmet needs are greater than $1.1 billion, we have the opportunity to ask for more money. So that is obviously our prerogative as we go through this process. The federal government, the Housing Development, Urban Development Department, determined that based on their quick calculations, they would allocate 1.1 billion. Now, keep in mind, when Hurricane Sandy went through New York, there were $50 billion given out in the same area on the HUD from community block development grants. And that's 50 with a B billion that was given in New York. A lot of that money was to buy property that were obviously on beaches, to create more dunes, to create more frontage, to give more protection. So I do believe if we do the town hall process, we're transparent, and it comes up to a dollar amount that is insufficient based on what they've awarded, there'll be plenty of opportunities to continue to do that. There's a real desire for workforce housing. It affects every business within Lee County. And we knew there was a housing crisis before this started. So we're trying to address this as quickly as we can. And where the branches that we have cross over one another, I'll give you an indication. So for example, when it comes to housing, inside most land development codes, including Sanibel, you have the opportunity to actually become more dense, put more properties or put more buildings or put more apartments or houses on a piece of property that you would unlike be able to do so if you own the piece of property. So on a particular parcel of property, let's say we're able to build 10 homes. When it comes to land development code and it's for workforce housing, we have the ability to maximize not only the width, but the height. And we might be able to put 30 or 40 homes on that piece of property. That's basically what takes place. So where the branches come into play is that we're going to need the planning, building, and capacity branch to work closer to the housing branch to understand what the needs are as we capitalize and take the money that we're entitled to try to address this issue. It's important. 70% of the money needs to be spent in income levels that have been determined by the federal government. We have the right to go back and ask them for a lower allocation, maybe 60% or 50%. They did that in other areas where then you could bring in a higher level of participation at different dollar amounts. Let's just say hypothetically, the dollar amount was up to $70,000. We might be able to push it to 80 or 90, but that's a process we have to go through. And the other part of that money pays for infrastructure. So again, we're able to do that with infrastructure. Along with that $1.1 billion, we received $335 million, what's known as hazard mitigation grants. That can be utilized for not only the match that may be required, but that also could be used for infrastructure. So I have a pot roughly of about $1.5 billion to address housing and infrastructure, separate from the $350 million I said earlier, separate from all the bridges and stoplights and street signs that I talked about. So I just wanted people to be aware of the town hall meetings that are taking place. The kickoff will take place. I will make sure that Ken has all the appropriate websites so you can see when the meetings take place. There'll be enough opportunity for you to participate. I know they'll be in Sanibel. I'm not certain. I haven't looked at all 16 meetings. I don't know if there's a particular place in Captiva, but at the very least, there'll be one on Sanibel to say that. Then the last thing that I really wanted to cover is we have put together monthly reports on as beaches and more things start to open. Obviously, Turner Beach is getting prepared to open. And most of, we're getting back to most of the beaches have the opportunity to be prepared to open. We asked the federal government to allow local engineering contracts to assist us in assessing the beaches to make sure we understood what was necessary to repair and so we could accelerate the repair process. It was being really driven by FEMA, and unfortunately FEMA moves at a particular pace. Our community obviously challenged us to move at a quicker pace, and with the legislature's help and FEMA's help, they were able to utilize local talent here within. So those are the big updates that I wanted to indicate to everybody. and try to give you an indication of where funding looked like in Tallahassee, both in the legislative branches, what's really going on with our housing dollars and cents that were allocated to us, the timeline associated with that. And then really to try to make sure that you have a copy of what we do is a weekly, and then we do a monthly summary of everything that's opening up within Lee County. So you have a feel for just the accomplishments we've gone through, the different beaches, the libraries, the parks, you name it, it really covers it in so many different areas as we go through this process. We did stop picking up debris. There is an appeal process. You have the right to send in an appeal to the Department of Emergency Management. They're taking those. They've been acting upon those. We have challenged them very, very, very adamantly that debris needs to be picked up. We recognize that hurricane season is only 2 months away. So we want to make sure that's all picked up and addressed. So as we come across issues, if we could be of assistance in my office, please let us know where this particular area or a pile of debris that's been down longer than before the cutoff date. If it accumulated, if someone came down last week, that's going to be more of a challenge for us to get picked up.
Can I just say a couple of things, just put this in context so that people who are listening can get their arms around what Commissioner Ruane is saying. Captiva is an unincorporated part, is a part of unincorporated Lee County. And so when Commissioner Ruane is talking about 1.1 billion for workforce housing and infrastructure related to it, or he's talking about 335 or 350 million for infrastructure and resilience, Captiva has put in for certain things to get built as part of that. So some of this money hopefully will go to our sewer project. Some of it will go to our stormwater project, and hopefully some of it will go to our long-term resilience that we're going to have to deal with to protect the island over time. But what people also have to understand, and this is the thing that Commissioner Ruane's doing, he's responsible for all of Lee County. But when kept about the world we live in, we are completely dependent on Lee County, not because we're part of unincorporated Lee County, but because we need Lee County. We need the hospitals, we need the roads, we need the food, we need the airport. We need to be able to use all those services in a good way to move around to make our lives worth living. And so even though it seems like we should only be interested to some people in what this means for Captiva, Captiva has a strong interest in making sure Lee County is resilient and is recovered. Without workforce housing in Lee County, we won't have restaurants on Captiva. We won't have landscapers. We won't have a restaurant. We won't have anything. And the same thing's true with Sanibel. So people on Captiva have to see this in the big picture, in the same way that Commissioner Ruane is seeing this in the big picture. And we can't just think about Lee County, Captiva alone. We have to think about Captiva's place in Lee County. And I think that's really important for people to understand when we think about the recovery and resilience that's going on over the next 5 years.
Okay, I had a question about workforce housing.
Mhm.
If we're gonna build workforce housing on Sanibel and Captiva, I don't see how that would be done on any kind of significant scale, given both Sanibel and Captiva's concern with density, existing zoning, and so forth. So I'm wondering, and David, maybe you know this, I mean, how do we establish any kind of significant workforce housing on Sanibel and Captiva when we have all the zoning in place that tries to protect existing levels of density? When you're talking about workforce housing, I'm thinking of, apartment, projects, things of that nature. And, I'm just wondering with, with our zoning and so forth, if we're really going to be able to establish significant amounts of workforce housing on Sanibel and Captiva.
Well, I could answer that unless Commissioner Ruane wants to answer that first, but I'm happy to respond to that, Jay. Let me just say, I think in terms of Captiva is built out, and and we also have through experience here that there's minimal need or request for workforce housing by
Right.
people who work on Captiva because they don't
Absolutely, yeah.
in the evening. We know that. That's why South Seas basically have removed 140 units of workforce housing because they couldn't fill it. Even though they had 140 units of workforce housing, it was filled with about 20 or 25 units for the last number of years. But in our code, we do have an option for mixed-use housing on mixed-use development on Andy Rossi Lane and in the commercial areas. If in fact you could have shops on the bottom floors and apartments on the top floors in a commercial area like Andy Rossi. It's not a lot of housing, but it would be within the context of zoning that exists on Captiva. Sanibel has a workforce housing plan in effect. They have nonprofits that work on that. That's going to have to be reviewed in terms
Yeah,
of.
but as I recall, that's 70 units, something like
Well,
that.
no, it was over 100, and they're looking to do more units, and there's discussion about that. But I think most of the workforce housing that the workforce on Captiva and Sanibel are looking for, and the rest of Lee County, are in areas of Fort Myers and Lee County, separate from.
So for example, Iona, maybe.
Or, I mean, there are a lot of, there's 1.1 billion. There's issues of, as Commissioner Ruane talked about, of zoning issues and density issues. But there's no question that everything I've heard from everyone in Lee County is a need for workforce housing.
That is without a doubt true, right?
So I think the challenge for the Board of County Commissioners and for the Resilience Lee and et cetera, is to figure out how to do that, to provide that housing, how to best allocate that $1.1 billion in a way which is consistent with the vision of Lee County over the next 25 to 50 years. And that's a Lee County which is growing very rapidly, but is also dependent on natural resources and on the waterways, et cetera, as the draw and the part of the lifestyle of Lee County. So that's the challenge. And I think that one has to look at the Lee plan, which has been in effect and basically lays out growth in Lee County for 50 years, but now to recognize that there are some new issues that we have to overlay on that plan. One, the key one is resilience, and what the other one is workforce housing, among others, that we have to integrate into that plan. And I think that's the challenge that the Board of County Commissioners has. I think there's funding for it, and to figure out how to do it in a way that is consistent with the vision that the Board of County Commissioners have placed in the Lee plan. Is that fair, Commissioner Ruane?
So, yeah, I mean, just to add on, so Jay, within the simple answer to this is within the land development code and even Sanibel's land development code, you're allowed to become more dense. I'm allowed to make a provision and a change if it's addressing workforce housing. I
Okay.
could take a commercial structure, I could add residential above it, I could start to become creative. Where that might not have been able to take place, I'm able to do that provided it's workforce housing.
I say,
And when I look at situations, when I was on CHR, we had as many as 144 units in total, including limited equity and workforce housing. There's a tract behind the Bailey's store that obviously Rich had donated. They're taking down the old workforce housing development on 7-Eleven. They're tearing that down and rebuilding that. If there was, let's just say 12 units there, 7-Eleven, and we want to make 24, we could. Because
okay,
we're allowed to make changes within the land development code. There's a lot of property on, McGregor and Sumlin. There's a piece of property on the corner of St. Carlos as you turn towards the beach. That's for sale. It's acres and acres and acres of property. That would be an ideal place to have workforce housing for both beaches. It's close enough that you don't have to travel all that far. It could obviously not only augment Fort Myers Beach, but could help Santa Monica Captiva. I'm not going to sit here and try to indicate that we're going to get thousands of units for Santa Monica Captiva, but what we're going to be able to do is provide units And we're going to be able to take advantage of tax credits and structuring that's just done. We just did a 96 unit workforce housing complex in Cape Coral. Right. We used $10 million worth of grant dollars that came from the same bucket from Irma. Okay, with the project cost $36 million. We received over $12 million in tax credits. Lee County gave land. Lee County gave a few dollars. Cape Coral gave some dollars. And next thing you know, you stretch $10 million into $35 million. So again, if we could become creative, we could find ways. And Lee County is challenging us to come back as a whole because we need all the services that you all require. Whether it's your garbage to be picked up, whether the water that comes out of your tap, whether it's your landscaper, whether it's people that serve you at the local restaurant or the deli. We need all those types of people to make sure they have housing, and we want to do everything possible.
Absolutely.
And try to find the best places we can do. But this is an opportunity that I not only think if we do correctly, we have an opportunity to go back and get a lot more money when it comes to this bucket. You know, and it's just an issue that we have. The challenge, honestly, is how do I take the $1.1 billion and make it grow to 3 times that? How do I look at my land development code and make changes that we're allowed to within our land development code to have mixed use housing, like David said, to allow us to become more dense? We allow us to have more density when it comes to workforce housing. But to David's point, we want to build it where it's going to be utilized. And one of the challenges that South Seas ran is when they had 140 units in workforce housing, they didn't have not even 20% of it full.
Right.
So, you know, that's the challenge you have is where do I build it? Where do people want to live? Well, people live in Captiva if we built them houses. Maybe not. Maybe their family's in Fort Myers. So we're trying to look at areas where it might be a little bit more convenient. Don't have to travel as far like to Lehigh Acres to come to Captiva. We're trying to find different areas that we could possibly identify. That's the whole reason for all the town hall meetings. We learn an awful lot from our community. Everybody pitches in, talks about it. We want to make sure we help everybody because every part of Lee County, I hear the same issue. I don't have enough staff, so I don't have enough workforce housing. People can't afford to live here. So
No, I mean, it's for sure a critical need for the area. Everybody talks about it all the time.
It's a huge challenge, Jay. I'm not gonna try to dismiss it. It is a significant challenge, but one that I think, considering the way we've structured this, it's a challenge that we can at least give it our best effort to make sure we utilize this. And I believe if we do it right, the opportunity for additional funding will be there.
Okay, good. Thank you. And Kevin, my next question, is there anything else you need from us? I think you have a good understanding of what Captiva's needs are. Is there any more that you need from David and me on what we think our financial needs are?
Jay, you've laid them out. What we're going to do is work closer, not only with yourselves, but with Sanibel. And I have a responsibility and an assignment from the Senate to give them our 5-year work project, what it looks like. So let's just talk about, the sewer issue, okay? How long is it going to take us to repair all the transmission lines? How long then will that project actually start? How much money will I need in what year? They're going to want a real 5-year plan, no different than you did in corporate America and I did. Okay, what does that look like and what year do we need the money? They want to allocate the dollars and cents that we need, but they want to allocate it to make sure we're going to utilize it, not take it out of their budget, take it out of their reserves, and it's sit in a pot someplace where we can't utilize.
Understand.
So the challenge I'll have, and I'll work with David, yourself, and the rest of the community, and the task force and the branches, is to really come up with a detailed 5-year plan. What it looks like, when we might need funding, based on supply issues, based on labor issues, to try to come up with the best possible plan we can.
Okay.
That's the biggest challenge we have right now. When you go into the legislator and you ask them for billions of dollars, the concern they always have is that we want to help you. If we gave you $2 billion, can you utilize it all? They don't want to give us $1 billion and $1 billion stay in our reserves for 2 years. That's
right.
not what they'd like to do.
Yeah,
So
understood.
that's some of the challenges. This has been a process that I think what's most important, David said before, we have to come back as a community. But the legislature has decided to do this, to simplify their process, is to fund at the county level as opposed to the municipality level. So within our task force, there's 13 different people that represent a function within government on our task force. So instead of the legislators dealing with 13 different entities, they deal with one and try to understand what is the total of what that community needs. They'd rather deal with 67 counties, just from an administration point of view, obviously from an efficiency point of view, from a funding point of view. That's why it's important to continue to develop the relationships. That's why I felt the need to come up with the task force as early as we did and continue to be there to remind them exactly what our needs are. And I think we're in the best position possible with the leadership up at Tallahassee, the relationships, because both President today and President tomorrow have connections directly to Lee County. I mean, they understand our pain, they feel it directly. So that's why I think it's so essential that we work together. We do this community outreach, and I think it's important to understand what the community wants. And then it's our responsibility to make sure we advocate for that. Because no sooner does the Tallahassee end in April, then you go back on the road and we go to DC, because funding starts there in May. So you go through the ask there. Again, what we've received, and we'll total up what we received is from the state alone. This PUD money is actually from the federal government, but it hasn't been awarded per se. It's awarded when the registry is actually filed. I mean, I don't believe the assistant secretary came down here and didn't make the announcement. We're not getting it awarded, but I don't have an official letter. What's important about that is when I get the letter, I have 120 days to put up a game plan of what it looks like. And then they have 60 days for them to review it and give us comments and changes and enhancements. So I wait 60 days for the award, an actual notification, 120 days of us putting together a plan, and then 60 days for them to come back with comments and adjustments. And we might have to do some revisions. So that's the way that lays out. But there's an awful lot of money, especially on the water side. I was on a call with the Department of Agriculture. They have a lot of sewer grants. So I was on with them, and they basically had $20 million that was set aside. We talked about what it costs to actually convert from septic to sewer. And we indicated, while that we appreciate the $20 million, that would take care of about 332 homes at an average price of $60,000 if there was no, obviously, supplementation or any type of grant that would mitigate or reduce the dollar amount. So we had asked them to think a lot more robustly with a few more zeros so we can address the actual issue it is. But, you know, Washington will be a whole different experience for us because it's big as it is. They have a budget that's much bigger than the state. And they've gone through with other national disasters and helped significantly, whether it's Sandy or any other issue, even Bay County, they helped significantly. So that's round two. That's right around the corner come May. So we'll catch our breath. You know, like I'd indicated, there might be one, maybe a second session if we run into some difficulties with the legislature up in Tallahassee. And then within a week or two, we'll be back to DC to obviously advocate there.
Okay. Well, Kevin, I'm sure I speak for everybody on the panel. Thank you so much for what you're doing here and leading this effort.
It's our community, Jay. Obviously, my family's here. I have the privilege of having both my kids live here and grow up here. So this is our community. Whatever I can do, whatever influence I'll have, I'm happy to do. And I asked for the job. So let's do the best we can. Let's work together. I can't thank everybody enough for all the participation because honestly, without your input, I don't have a playbook on how to redevelop Lee County. I need your help.
Right. Okay. Do we have other questions for Commissioner Wayne? Anybody from the audience, Ken?
No.
Okay, well, Commissioner, thanks so much for opening our meeting as you've been doing in the past several sessions we have. It's so much appreciated by our community that you take the time, to lead off all of our panel meetings. It's so much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me your time. Have a great day, all.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, next up. The sheriff's office update, Mike Sawicki, are you around?
I don't see anybody from the sheriff's office on the line.
Okay, what about Chief Jeff Paul from the fire district?
I am here. Yes. Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Jeff.
Morning, Jeff.
Well, that was quite an update from Commissioner Ruane. So
Yeah, I'll
go
say.
ahead and I'll keep mine a little shorter so you guys can move this meeting along. One thing I did want to mention, if anybody, either residents or commercial on the island, have a structure that they're tearing down, if we can use that to train with, before you do that, please either yourself reach out or have your contractor reach out to me. I'm not sure what that still looks like out here. I have talked to a few people on Sanibel and some residents and whatnot with some houses. So those structures provide invaluable training for us. So if anybody has any or knows of any, please feel free to reach out to myself. I know there's still a lot of stuff going on out here and continually will happen on the island. So other than that, I won't reiterate all the same types of things that Kevin just said. Obviously, funding is an issue for every governmental entity, whether it's in Lee County or the surrounding areas. So we're all going through those same reimbursement processes and looking for ulterior funding to get through what we just did with the hurricane. So we're obviously going through those same scenarios as the county as a whole is. So other than that, I see Sandy's hand is up. Does that mean you have a question there, Sandy?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Regarding the, I have some cottages that are probably going to be torn down. And when I was building the Bimini Bait Shack back years, I had a building there and we used it for the Island of McGregor Fire Department. And they did all the training there. But then I had an environmental cleanup problem from the debris. And I
Okay.
had to bring in some environmental people to clean up the site.
Okay.
So can you help walk me through how that would take place?
Yeah, so the trainings that we do anymore on structures don't have any of that type of destruction. We're just, the only thing that we use is like a fog machine. So it's all just fake smoke that just dissipates and whatnot. So it doesn't leave any actual environmental hazard on the back end. And then the only other thing there would be, which we can help obviously clean up whatever mess there would be, but it's typically broken windows, drywall, stuff like that as we use the structure. So nothing that your heavy equipment operator is not going to do the same of. So we kind of eliminate that hazard from the property owners having to do something on the back end, because that did always kind of end up after the fact, and we'd actually burn structures. It's pretty difficult and a very long, time consuming, expensive process to actually burn a structure anymore because of all the hazards that happen during and after. So it's a clean process we do aside from any demolition that may happen. But if you're demoing it anyways, I don't think they're going to care if there's another hole in the roof or a hole in the drywall.
Good, no problem. Well, then I'll be in touch as soon as I find out what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not. So.
Okay,
great.
awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Jeff, I have a question for you. With all of the, downed vegetation, all around everywhere that, is yet to be cleaned up, vegetation that's on vacant lots and, and so forth.
Yep.
What kind of a fire risk do we have right now?
So obviously, we have a much higher fire risk than when there's not. Unfortunately, with the timing of the year, this is always the highest portion of the year. I'm sure everybody on here sees the news and how many brush fires there are on a daily basis in the area. So the county does still have a burn ban in effect for the county. I haven't noticed anybody trying to have bonfires or burn debris piles out here. But as we move closer towards it starting to rain, I mean, we all saw it rain a little bit here the last couple of days. So lightning strikes can obviously occur. And when vegetation is as dry as it is, that hazard for brush fires is much greater. The good and bad thing for us is we don't have a lot of open space for big brush fires. The downside to that is the vegetation we do have is very dry, and there's a lot of structures that are close. So Obviously that fire potential is greater now, until we start getting some more rain and or more of this debris finally, picked up and hauled out.
Okay.
Jeff, could you just give us an update on the ambulance and if there's anything we need to know about the helicopter access pads?
Ambulance, I can tell you, with quite a bit of certainty that I believe after our board meeting this month and the county commissioners meeting, which is May 2nd, that issue will be resolved in our benefit. How's that?
Okay, that's great. Everything's slow, but
Yes.
we'll get there, right?
Yeah, I can't speak obviously 100% for either board, but I'm fairly confident, highly confident that by the end of both of those meetings, we'll have a resolution in favor of the island.
That's great. Okay, and what about helicopter access pads? How we
Yeah,
doing?
now that's obviously a different topic. As we just had that same conversation on open land for employee housing and everything else. We didn't create any new land that's wide open to land a helicopter in. So that's obviously always going to be a challenge out here until we figure out a helicopter pad on top of somebody's house or out in the water or something like that. But none of those are easy solutions, but having an ambulance out here that's able to provide the transport quickly will be a huge benefit as far as that concern goes as well. We do still have access to Osprey on the south end. Royal Shell is still granted us access to use that property to fly out of, as well as mosquito control on Sanibel. And then the lawn up in South Seas for the time being, we can still use that one. So we do still have a few options that I feel comfortable with right now.
Can I ask you what I think is a stupid, silly question? Do you mind? But given that there's resilience money and infrastructure money that seems to be flowing, is there any possibility of, I don't know, fixing up the firehouse in a way that has a helicopter pad on top of the firehouse?
I'm not going to say no because I don't know the answer 100% to that. The meetings I've been in, that isn't necessarily a qualifying thing under resiliency, but I guess it doesn't hurt to look into it.
I just was curious whether, we can do some, rebuilding there that would make, I don't know about the size necessary or what your roof situation is, but the idea of putting a helicopter pad on top of the firehouse roof just seems to be such a natural thing if that were possible.
Yeah, no, I will say that was brought up and we did consider that a while ago. It would take quite a bit to make that happen. I'm not saying it's not possible. You can build anything you want, right? We would have to get obviously around, we would be exceeding the height for the island as far as that structure would be concerned. We're already maxed out on the building as it is. I don't know if that would be something that would qualify or wouldn't. I don't know how big of a article that would be. There's obviously a lot of unknowns with that, but yeah, it is an
Okay.
option.
I think it's a great idea if you could come up with like a parking structure that you're parking your cars in the shade underneath it, and then it's a helicopter landing pad, and-
Yeah. So I will say that was, I actually thought that same thing over the parking lot area, but the height of it would have to be pretty high because of the power lines run directly in front of the station. So their clearance of those lines as they come in and take off are quite a bit. But yeah, no, it is a good idea, and it would obviously have its challenges and hurdles, but
All right,
yeah.
let's percolate on that a little bit. Okay.
Very good.
Also, if I may say too, long-term, we have a plan eventually, probably won't be for a year or two, to raise our tennis courts up to have parking underneath. Now, obviously, there'll be nets and poles, but they can come down in an instant. And during the last storm, we had the helicopter landing on those tennis courts. So just something that may show up a year or two down the road, possibly.
Wow, okay.
That's a good thought.
So Linda, where's Linda Laird? I think as part of the resilience planning for resilient Captiva, the helicopter issue, I think, is complicated and it can encompass a lot of different ideas, and maybe that becomes part of what our plan is long-term. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, any questions for Jeff before he leaves us? Anything from the audience? Okay, moving along. Next
Thank
up
you.
is our, thanks, Jeff,
Yeah.
is our CEPD update from Daniel Munt. Daniel.
Good morning, everybody. I just have a couple of quick notes. Our monthly board meeting is going to be held this upcoming Monday at 1 o'clock. Zoom link will be posted on the website. And the beach tilling that's been occurring is scheduled to be completed within the next day or two. There's been a couple of equipment breakdowns that delayed its completion, but it should be finishing up in the next day or so. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions from everybody, or can move along.
Can you briefly give us the status of where we are on getting the beach repaired following the storm?
So I kind of alluded to this a bit last night, is we are still in the process. The Army Corps of Engineers is under legal review with us right now to see if they're going to provide us with assistance. A lot of the things they're looking at is the easement situation that we have. We have to have the right type of easements, as well as the parking situation. That's been under legal review for well over a month now. I would hope it's going to be wrapping up soon, but I know much the same as FEMA, the Army Corps moves at their own pace. If the Army Corps does decline to provide us assistance, we'll re-engage with FEMA. We already have a claim kind of on standby with them to provide assistance, and then once we have the funding mechanism sorted out, then we'll move forward with that. So
Well,
short answer, I
Daniel,
guess, is no time soon, but we're working towards it.
yeah, I know this requires a judgment on your part, but do you feel pretty confident that we will get our beach repaired without assessment to property owners?
I believe we've got a good amount of funding scheduled, both through legislative appropriations as well as through FDEP and other sources. I believe if there is one, it'll be minimal.
Okay,
I can't say for certain one way or the other.
I understand that.
Yeah, we cannot say for certain, but we certainly have everything in place to make it either zero or minimal. That's what. Nothing to the order of this last one.
Right, okay.
I have two questions, Shay.
Yes.
Okay, first off, we had discussed earlier at various times in the past about who's going to be responsible for maintaining the beach on Captiva. And when there's a fish kill, we had dead turtles, we had dead tarpon, and it seems to be in nowhere's land. In other words, who's responsible? The county's responsible, but they only come out when things are so bad, and by the time they get here, things have already deteriorated. And CEPD doesn't feel it has the authority or hasn't had the resources to take responsibility for the beach. And we had talked about somehow for CEPD to subcontract with the county, since the county has at least technical responsibility for cleaning the beach, so that we have people out on Captiva at the time the beach needs to be addressed to be able to address it. And I don't know if there's been any progress on that, but I think it's important, if we can do it, to have CEPD. You have a vehicle, you maybe need more staff, but somebody's got to be responsible for our beaches. And I'm not talking about just renourishing it, but on a day-to-day basis, when we have the fish kills, when we have lobster or crab traps stuck in the ground, as they've been since the hurricane, et cetera. And so I'm just hoping, Linda and Daniel, there's some way we can follow through on this to to see if we can have CEPD, if it wants to, take that responsibility and have reimbursed by, and be reimbursed by the county to take that responsibility and to maintain our beaches.
Daniel, why don't we put it on the agenda for the meeting next Monday to discuss? How does that sound?
I can do that, and there's definitely a lot of engagement back and forth that would occur with that, as well as, you know, it would definitely be a subcontracting issue, because I do know that we're even having trouble hiring parking lot attendants at this time, so I can imagine hiring someone staffed specifically for that.
I have a question. It used to be, because I would volunteer with SCCF and do the turtle patrol on Captiva and part of Sanibel. And if there was a dead turtle, we actually, you know, we had to bury it. And we did. It wasn't fun, but they would come out and take samples of the turtle, et cetera, first. And then that was part of being a volunteer. And then they took over and had basically staff do that. Do they not bury the turtles any longer?
No, I actually had coordinated with Kelly Sloan through SCCF. She had told me about that process to bury the turtles, but actually Lee County Parks and Recreation will come out and remove the turtles.
But in this particular case, Sandy, there was a large turtle, at least one, maybe two, that were down between near Hagerty Beach, South Seas, that was decomposing for many days of the week. And it just seems that responsibility, you know, gets passed around and no one really feels they have a responsibility, a legal responsibility for it. And it just slips through the cracks. And I think we need to formalize that kind of responsibility for Captiva.
One other thing too, in a major fish kill, I know that the VCB has funding and ability. Now, do they just fund it, Daniel, and send out their crews? How does that work on a major, when you have not individual turtle issues, but for the major fish kill, I know that they have the funding to clean that up.
Right. So recently we had anticipated a large fish kill. I coordinated with Lee County Parks and Recreation, and they pulled the permit to be able to rake the entire beach to clean it up. They did make the determination that the amount of fish kill on Captiva was not sufficient enough to engage in that. As soon as I was made aware of the specific turtle, that's when I had coordinated between SCCF and Lee County Parks and Recreation. I believe they were out there either the next day after that coordination or the day following. So now that those connection lines and communication lines have been established more clearly, you know, in the event of turtles specifically, hopefully that's a more, you know, streamlined process. I do agree with David. It's
Daniel,
nice
I
to see.
think,
Yes.
yeah, I think that David's point is, if it doesn't meet the threshold to have Lee County come out with a machine to clean up the beach, where are we in that zone of never land?
Exactly.
I do agree with that. I think that's, as Linda said, something we can put on the agenda to engage and find a solution for that, you know, satisfies everyone.
It seems to me that obviously CEPD is responsible for the beaches, even if it's supposed to be the county doing it. So I think we need to talk about how do we do a better job of keeping them clean and taking care of, turtles, tarpons, whatever that we find on the beach.
You know, Linda, there may be a way to engage the VCB to get some type of funding for these not dramatic cleanups, but maybe there's a fund there, a slush fund that can be used. I don't know, but it might be good to engage the VCB and see what they say about that.
Daniel, if you have time this week, can you take a look at that too, please?
Yes.
The other issue I wanted to raise, and I don't know how to address this, but I think it fits in certainly within the CEPD mandate and has to do with resiliency. Post-hurricane, property owners are engaging contractors to create cuts from Captiva Drive into the dunes. So along the Twin Water stretch and some other stretches on Captiva, including possibly the Village and the Gold Coast, we have now cuts so that people could walk through without walkovers, but just cuts onto the beach through the dunes. We even have, in a certain circumstances, golf carts being driven and parked into the dunes on the west side of, I'm not talking about Twin Waters, but private properties on the west side of Captiva Drive. And I just don't know what the rules are with respect to that. And what we learned during the hurricane is that we had a lot of sand that came pouring through some of those beach cuts and affecting Captiva Drive. And I just don't know whether property owners know if they can do it or how they can do it, or should they do it, or do they need DEP permits to do it, or should it be prohibited? All those questions I don't have an answer to. I don't even know if CEPD has addressed them. But if we're going to continue to have beach cuts, then we're not going to have dunes providing the protection to the rest of the island, and particularly our roads, because the water will flow straight through the beach cuts. They will be funneled right through those beach cuts. And so I think that we just need, our community needs to have a sense of what's permitted and what's best for the island. If people want to get from their properties to the beach, we can have dunes and we can have walkovers if they're permitted, but we need to think this through before people on an individual basis just do what seems right, but may not be right.
David, I think that's a really good point. I think, if you live on the beach, you want to be able to walk, through the dunes, to set up your umbrellas and so on, on the beach. So I think everybody just by nature is going to create his own pathway, through the dunes. So I guess there needs to be some kind of policy or direction go out to homeowners about what they should be doing.
When I've gone down these roads, I haven't, and we have called in FDEP to look at some of the pathways people are cutting through the dunes. And basically what I have heard is as long as they have a permit, they can do it. I think from our island perspective and a resiliency perspective, that's a little weak. I think as we are working through resilient dunes, that we need to have more education of our homeowners and perhaps more stronger regulations for what people should and shouldn't do on the dunes. But legally, it's sort of weak. And what tends to happen is people get permits and they do what they want. That's
I would guess most people aren't getting permits, they're just doing it.
There's quite a few who do get permits too.
Okay, all right.
Hey, I had a question. It's Bruce here. I had a question on for CEPD here and the dunes specifically. And I guess my question is when I hear the discussion about we're looking to the state and some of these agencies to rebuild the dunes to where they were. Are we thinking big enough in terms of why aren't we looking to build the dunes to be bigger than they were? And I take the point about the cuts, but it seems to me, it looks like at some time in the past, we obviously put some rocks down here along the beach, and then obviously the sand's kind of washed or blown up and sort of covered some of that up. But shouldn't we be thinking about if and I think along Captiva Drive here, especially, had the dunes been probably a couple of feet higher, I don't think we would have ended up getting overflow water into the street and some of the homes.
Okay, well, let me try here. My guess is because of the height of the surge, it probably would have been difficult to have dunes that high. And actually, I think we would have gotten pushback from homeowners about blocking off views if we go that high. my guess.
I don't know about that, I mean, most homes, Linda, are elevated, and so, I mean, even if you raise the dune 6 feet, I don't think it would block the
Then there-
large majority.
So I
Then
think
there's also a question of how much sand we can put into the system without really screwing it up.
right. That's a
Because-
good point too, Linda, with the amount of sand. I'll also say that the dune, one of the biggest aspects to them is reducing the wave energy. And I think that they were pretty effective in accomplishing that. I know our engineers, take into consideration that when they're designing our beach. And when I gave my update about, maybe predicting the next beach nourishment, one of the items was the Army Corps of Engineers is evaluating if they're going to provide us assistance. I will note that if the Army Corps of Engineers does provide us assistance, they're the ones that will design the beach to their specifications and they'll construct the beach. It's kind of at their mercy at that point, how they're going to design it. If we want to do something additional, it'll take place after that.
Right.
And then
And-
also with the dune cutouts will allow water to seep through. I think from a resiliency perspective, if we could reduce the number of cutouts or even provide walkovers, as David had mentioned, or at the very minimal, make them at 45-degree angles so that we don't have a straight line from the beach to the roadway, that would, go a long way in updating our resiliency for those critical areas.
So we are, as part of the request we have right now, is to have money to fund a more resilient beach plan so that it uses less new sand every time, that we keep the sand, and can we put more hard material within the dunes. On Captiva Drive itself, if you'll note that we had a tremendous overwash of sand. You can, at like around the curve, and then the rocks came out. Previously, if we hadn't had that, you would have seen Captiva Drive washed out. And that's what we've had before, especially Tween Waters, and when we would have to drive down Captiva Drive through Tony's parking lot, which is what happened before. If you look at the causeway too, at the beginning of the causeway, where it washed out, they did not have the dune system. They did not have the natural whatever to hold they hadn't built it up the way we had built up our dunes, and it all washed out. It also had a lot more wave action against it. So I guess to your point though, is we've put in for funding for more resilient dunes. And-
Linda, yeah. One thing too, the dunes grow themselves, as you know. I mean, I remember when we did the first renourishment, my road and thing was dead flat. I go out there today, those dunes are 6 feet. And they continue to grow if, again, the planting is there, the sea oats and the 45-degree, whatever. But, depending on like you said, Daniel, how the engineers design it, the planting, to me, is the key to preserving those dunes more so than anything.
And I think we need a better program for our citizens about taking care of your dunes. I haven't figured out how to make that happen yet, but so that people understand that walking through the dunes on their private path to the beach may be very romantic and nice, but it may not necessarily be the best for their homes and the best for the community. Also, how do you take care of your dunes? You can plant in your dunes. You can do things in your dunes if you get with some help, and we can build up the dunes. I've also seen people cleaning up all the garbage, quote, garbage, like dead trees. And I'm not sure that's even a good idea, because as the wind blows through the sand, that drops the sand and helps build up the dunes. So I think we have a long way to go, basically. And we haven't jumped into it full force yet.
Linda, hasn't SCCF been helpful with plannings and, information on maintaining the dunes?
Yes, they have. I think we need to get more of it out to everybody and have more awareness and whatever sessions for our people.
Well,
SCCF can come out, take a look at your dunes and say, ooh, this is good, this is bad. I also think our program on planting has been effective. Again, we need to do more. And well, let's step back. We got hit by somewhere around a 7-10 foot surge. Our dunes held basically. We had blowouts or we had holes in them.
mhm.
They absorbed. And so what we've had on Captiva was actually, we got hit by a Category 5 storm and we survived and we did pretty well from the dune perspective. So we've learned some, but I think we should consider what we have done so far successful with room for improvement.
Mhm.
What, can I just ask, Tony's here, so maybe we can just, Tony Lappy, I have a question for you, and I guess for CPD also. It always strikes me that the most vulnerable piece of property with respect to Captiva in terms of flooding and destruction is Santiva. I mean, we saw what happened, you know, in Santiva this time. And that road that's right south of Blind Pass Bridge is just begging to be washed out. Even when we have a high tide, the water is splashing over that seawall. And so it seems to me it's just was incredibly lucky that we were able to cross the bridge to get to Captiva without that road being washed out. And I guess Sanibel is responsible for that area, but it seems to me that that's not going to be Sanibel's #1 priority, given it's at the very north end of Sanibel, but it's got to be our priority because it seems to me that's the place that we're going to make it impossible to get to Captiva by road. And so is there any discussion with CEPD and Sanibel or discussion with anyone, Lee County, about how we're going to fortify that area just south of Blind Pass Bridge?
Well, to answer your question, David, first of all, the road, remember when they hardened that curve where they put the tower, if you want to call it the pole, by hardening that road at that curve, obviously we would have lost that road, I think, in the storm. For whatever reason, there's pretty good sand dune out there in front that basically probably broke a lot of the wave action, but certainly didn't stop the flooding of that unit. I would think in a long-term plan, if they were to raise that road, and they have raised it somewhat over the years, they put, another 1.5 feet of asphalt on top of there. And this may be the time that they may look at that, but who you contact, is this something from, the road people, because it's a state road, I believe, isn't it?
I think we have to start with Joel. Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
I was going to say Mike Campbell had engaged me over this past week, and I don't have any details, but he had requested a little bit of time to talk about the hardening and reinforcement of that curve of that road on the CEPD's agenda this coming Monday.
We
Mike
did give him, just
From Lee
interrupt
County.
1 second, we did give permission for the county. They are going to truck sand in through our property. I had to give them permission where they want to build out sand, where they harden the curve from where Castaways was going south. So that I gave them permission, and I'm sure that's part of the permitting process to put more sand there. But I think hardening or raising that road is certainly a good issue as well.
Yeah, Daniel, if you could, work on that and just let the panel know how it's developing, because like I say, I know it's Sanibel, it's Lee County, it's a lot of players here, but it seems to me that's the thing we have to worry about most if we're going to want to be able to drive to Captiva after another storm.
Definitely, and I do know that part of the beach would be under our beach nourishment permit covers that first portion of Sanibel, so it's Captiva's only evacuation route, so it's important for us. I will provide updates.
Well,
Thank you.
Daniel, let's put it as a specific item that.
It is.
Yes, it's already on there, but I think in the bigger picture. I've also heard Tony, and you can tell me, somebody said there, we have conduits under the road or something to help reduce to get the water to go through. Do you know anything about this? Is this true?
Yes, I do. Yeah. We're earlier on when we had the one, I think it was Irma, when it flooded, and Judy Zamama was saying there's I think 2 to 3 culverts under that road that got clogged. And Irma, and then we had, you remember pictures of years ago where the cottages were all flooded. And the reason is the road trapped the water and there was no exit for the water. Judy Zamama with their team before that came and cleaned out those culverts. I think there are 3. There's one south of us, and then there's one like in the middle of Castaways and one towards the northern part of Castaways. I believe it's 3 culverts, and that allows when the water does overflow to not have the road act as a dam that used to flood my cottages, which I was going to raise, but never happened. So anyways, those culverts are there. There are 3 culverts there. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on? Next item was the South Seas update. Bob Walter is not with us, so we will skip over that.
SCCFJ.
I'm
You missed
sorry.
SCCF.
Oh, my
SCCF.
God, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, I did. I'm sorry,
Sitting
man.
quietly there.
Okay.
Well, it's good to be here with you guys. Just a quick couple updates from our side today. So as you all know, we're in the middle of the legislative session. 2 things we're keeping an eye on right now. One good, one not so good. HB 177 is the Safe Waterways Act. We were hoping to see that get through committee this week. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to be heard. So we're going to be definitely working on the back end and maybe trying to tie in some other people to try to pressure the committees to bring it to be heard. This is the bill that would mandate announcing if there's certain water quality issues on beaches and other waterways, namely bacteria concentrations that are being found, just so the public's more informed. So we're always in favor of more data and more information here. So we're in favor of that one. On the other side, there's SB 540, which is the local government comprehensive plan bill. And that includes fee shifting provisions that if a private citizen or a citizen group challenges a comprehensive plan and fails, they will be on the hook for all legal fees from not only the opposing side, but also any interveners. So that means uncontested, huge amounts of legal fees from developers, lawyers. So we're pushing against that one. We have been sending out action alerts, getting emails to the committee members. That's being heard by the Rules Committee right now, actually. So hopefully we'll see some movement on that, but we haven't really even seen a lot of conversation happening. It's been flying through committees. So we expect it to make it to a floor vote pretty quickly. So if you're signed up for our action alerts, you can expect to see more calls to send out emails about those, and then possibly even a veto campaign, because this is one we feel really strongly about.
Matt, could you explain that a little slower for the art?
Sorry, yeah.
No, not
Had
that
a
I
lot of
can't
coffee this
see, but
morning.
what my understanding is that, let's say you have a comprehensive plan and the developer wants to build that contrary to it. And that if they sue, then they can go ahead and do what they wanted to do. And B, if they win, then the municipality is on hook for all legal fees. Is that correct?
There is a risk of that too, if so that's one way it could function. And then the other is if there's a change to the comprehensive plan or developers trying to work around the comprehensive plan and the municipality or county agrees with it, and then a citizen group questions that and loses, even if it is a valid question, use of the legal system as the legal system was designed to be used, then yeah, in that case, citizen groups would have to pay for the developer fees, or the municipality would have to pay for the legal fees of the developers as well. So, and this is just another one of the fee shifting provisions that we've seen. I mean, the legal system is already set up to prevent frivolous lawsuits, and we have a mechanism for shifting attorneys' fees in the case of a frivolous lawsuit being brought, but this would stand in the way of just anyone participating in the process effectively, because on its face, you have the inability to win or to lose cases without having any large amounts of funds being driven away from your organization or yourself. And what we've seen in practice is this just has an overall chilling effect, because people have to make the decision of whether or not to even question something if they think that it's wrong, because they can't risk losing however many high attorney's fees that the interveners are going to bring in.
What if the
So-
developer files suit and loses? Do they have to pay all the fees?
If they file suit and lose, then yes, they would have to pay. So that's, and there's a couple of amendments that we've supported that have been placed in front of the committee that would limit payment of fees to $10,000. There's one that would remove interveners from this, so you would just have to pay the municipality's attorney's fees, and nobody in the committees has even read these on the floor or responded at all to them. So it sounds like we're hearing that this is going to move pretty quickly. So that's unfortunate. Yeah, were there any other questions on either of those bills? So second update, some good news. Last week, we was the Eden Oak hearing in front of the Board of County Commissioners. I'm sure most of you are aware of the Eden Oak development that was going in just south of Shell Point, off of Shell Point Boulevard. The project wants to take out mangroves and put in single family houses. We have been standing against that for the past 7 years. This is how long this has been going on, with continuances. And finally, it was before the zoning or the Board of County Commissioners to get a zoning change from agriculture to residential. And we had a good turnout of people who showed up. A lot of people spoke in opposition to the project. There were no voices other than the applicant who were in favor of the project. And we were expecting it to not go that way last week, actually. We were hearing that the applicant had asked for a remand back to the hearing examiner in light of a more recent decision that we think would cut in favor of the developer. And pretty quickly, the Board of County Commissioners made it clear that they were not going to entertain a remand and wanted to deny the hearing request or the zoning request. And after about 2 hours of public comment, they did just that, and it was an awesome victory. So that's great news, and really speaks to, I think, the shift that's occurred after Ian specifically, and how important people realize some of these natural buffers, mangroves, dunes are. And I think that our leadership in the county is also recognizing that and is supportive of protecting some of these spaces. So that's great to see, and gave a lot of people hope for the future of Lee County.
Hey, Matt, is that still that condominium that was proposed there as you go towards the causeway? Is that still online going forward? You know?
Within Shell Point or a separate development?
No, it's past Shell Point. It's more as you come around and you're about maybe a half a mile out from the entrance of the causeway. I remember seeing a sign there. They were going to build a condominium and do all this, and they were going to have different entrance, coming in and out of the road. I don't know if that ever went forward, because I'm sure they'd be knocking out some mangroves to do that project.
Yeah, I haven't heard of anything about that recently.
Okay, maybe
but
it
I'll look
dropped off. Yeah, it could have. I don't know. But I don't know if anybody else remembers seeing those signs on the causeway when you were pulling in. Did you see them, John? You're shaking your head.
Yeah, oh yeah, that was
maybe it just went away. I don't know.
That sign was up for quite a while there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had it for sale, and I kept on encouraging the county to buy that because it included on the water side as well. It wasn't anything buildable, but I thought it would be great for the county to use. And if there was anything that you could use for parking, but the beach is used by the public so much. But the county, they never responded in a positive way. So there must have been other areas. But yeah, we don't want condos going there either.
Mhm. Yeah.
No, and I'll look into that and see what's going on. Because we are talking about trying to get Eden Oak back in front of the Conservation 2020 committee now that this development project has been significantly slowed down, if not fully killed. So maybe there could be a larger parcel tie-in with that as well. So thank you for letting me know about that. And then the last thing was a plug for the event tonight at Big Arts. The Sandcap Citizens for Resilient Futures having their second town hall and panel discussion. SCCF will be moderating through Carrie, and then James will be on the panel itself talking about lessons learned from Ian and where we go from here and how we build on what these islands already are. So that's at 6 at Big Arts this evening.
Is there going to be a Zoom component to it?
It will be streamed. I'm not sure if it's Zoom or Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be on the city's Facebook page. So you don't need to log in, just go to the Facebook, and there won't be a participation through the Facebook, but it'll be up there.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's all I had. So if anyone has any questions for me or.
Matt, thank you. Let's all take a 5-minute break and be back in 5.
All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Hey, John, are you gonna go to the, what is it, the meeting from, the, the chamber meeting, the luncheon, are you going to that?
No, I didn't know about that, Tony.
Yeah, that's the one where RNL is gonna talk about, I guess, their projects and what's going on. Kind of like, Doug and I did with what our company was doing, so I can't make it because I got another conflict, but it ought to be an interesting meeting, I would think.
Oh, do you know when that is and the time?
I think it's, when is it?
Wednesday. I know I can't make it either. I think
Yeah.
it's tomorrow. And Larry Roberts passed away, so there's a lot of great interest in what's going to be happening. But his son Larry has been very involved in Robbie, and they have all this management in place. So they knew that he was.
Yeah, it is tomorrow. Yeah, I gotta go to a VCB ambassadors luncheon, thank you deal, so can't be in two places at once,
Yeah. Do you know what time that is, Sandy?
It's the
Or
usual.
Tony?
Yeah,
What-
like 11:30 usually it starts. Yeah,
11:30?
At
Okay.
Marriott, right? It's at the Marriott, isn't it, Sandy? Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, I didn't know Larry Senior passed away.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
I know. He was such a great neighbor to me. After Hurricane Charlie, it was, he always called me little lady, and he'd say, "What can I do for you, little lady?" And I said, crimp roofing, and so he brought me a whole truckload full, and he never would let me pay him. So I finally sent him a blank check, and then with it just to fill it, and then he sent it back and he says, "Don't you know you don't send people blank checks?" And he tore it in half and sent it back. So he said, "I just want key lime pie for free." So I said, "You got it." So he was.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, yeah. Well, it looks like, the cottages, they're redoing the roofs right now. So I haven't, I talked to some employees that work there a couple days a week, and they don't really know what's happening, but they know, they want to move forward with fixing them up. And so I'd like to make that meeting. That'll be good.
Yeah, let me know what happens, will you? Because I would have liked to have been there. I know the two gals that owned Over Easy Cafe, they're gonna be there, and, they got, because all of their rental properties on Sanibel, people kind of wanted to know a little bit what, where's the future, what's going on, so just an update. Thanks, John, for going if you can, that'd be great.
No, thanks for bringing that up, Tony.
Okay, I assume we're all back together. Next up was the South Seas update, but Bob Walter is unable to join us today. So I think we'll have to wait till next month for that update. David, I've got an agenda item here. Any additional updates from you, for example, on Roosevelt Channel? Do you have anything you wish to add at this point?
No, just three quick things. One is, Roosevelt Channel's a done deal. They're just going to have to put the signage up to make it a slow speed zone throughout all of Roosevelt Channel, and that's the county's going to have to do the signage, and they will. Just on debris, if there's some people coming back to the island and there was a legitimate reason why they couldn't get back earlier, and they have debris that needs to be removed, and they never went to iandebris.com because of some personal reason, but they still have large amount of debris because they came back late that has to be removed, but they couldn't do it earlier, they can still contact the county, and maybe they can get some relief if they have a legitimate excuse of why they couldn't have done it prior to the expiration of the date when debris could be removed. So if you do have that issue, I think you can call Commissioner Ruane's office, District 1 office, and explain the difficulty you had, and then they would put you in touch with the appropriate person at Lee County.
Right, he did in his overview today, he did bring that up again, remember?
Yes. But it'll only apply in that rare situation where a home property owner has a legitimate reason why they couldn't have done it at the time that was set out for the removal of debris. And just the third thing is that we're going to hear more about this, but there are 4 bills in the state legislature on preemption basically trying to prevent local municipalities or the counties even from creating their own local rules that would control water quality, pollution, development, et cetera. There is a significant move in the Florida legislature basically to preempt local control and home rule. And this is coming up repeatedly, and it's going to affect all of us if in fact it continues to happen. But we'll talk about it going forward, and I'm sure SCCF will be on top of it. But now it's going to become a problem because there are new members of the state legislature who feel their mandate is to eliminate local control.
Does anybody know, is there a good chance that this would actually pass, these kind of rules preempt local control?
They are pending. There are 4 bills now pending right now in the state legislature. Some of them have passed little by little over time. Just like we know, we've experienced ourselves, the control of duration of short-term rentals.
Right.
Have be preempted by the state.
But we were grandfathered on that, Lee County was, right?
Just by the luck, grace of God, we were, and so was Sanibel, but you know, they can remove grandfathering too as they go down the pike. But there are now pending pieces of legislation that would prevent localities from creating their own rules regarding pollution, creating their own rules regarding the need for infrastructure before development can take place. And that would prohibit even local initiatives or referendums on land development codes. So this is a real threat to local control and home rule. And it's sort of odd that it's coming from a Republican state legislature with conservative principles, but it's really big government trying to dominate local home rule. And it's the world's turning upside down right before our eyes.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay. Next item, Hurricane Ian discussion. Linda?
Okay, so we had an event last night at the community center. About 60 people were there in person and about 20 on Zoom. And what we did is we went through the hurricane, what happened, and what the dunes did. And then we also, at the end, we opened it up to the community to talk about what they thought worked well and where we had room for improvement, and what they thought the panel, the CEPD, should be focusing on going forward. I think the whole event worked better than I'd hoped or expected, so that was great. We had a lot of engagement, a lot of positive feedback. The comments in terms, we're compiling them, but the comments that I remember are working on the dunes, working on the beaches, get more resilience in the dunes, working on telecom, that we need to do a better job on telecom. Whatever that meant, both immediately, long-term. The communications on our island were very poor during post-hurricane and in general, and that they would like a longer-term resilience plan. I think that summarizes it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good, Linda. I think I also saw a lot of comments related to burying underground utilities, going forward with the sewer project.
And
also.
yes, I think we saw those too. I glossed over the part about how appreciative the community was of our police, fire, and post office personnel, and how appreciative they were of all the work the panel did and all the communications the panel did. They were extremely positive about what we all had done to help bring the island back. Some people said what needs to be improved, and they said none for a while. So good news there.
Well, I thought it was a good session, Linda, and well done. And I think we've got a lot of feedback to work with.
Mhm. That's it.
Okay, anything else, Linda, or anybody have questions on that?
No.
Okay, the Jeff Powell campaign, that campaign ended on March 31st. We had 129 Captivans make a donation to Chief Powell. And we raised a total of $152,000 to help him rebuild his home. The donations ranged from as little as $100 all the way up to some folks even contributed $10,000. This is a campaign that certainly exceeded all my expectations. When Bruce McDonald and I first got the idea to do this. So I think it was a terrific success, and to think there's something like 1,200 households totally on Captiva, or properties on Captiva, to have 125 people contribute to that campaign, I think says tons about our community and how much we appreciated the response that we got from both the fire department and the sheriff's department. So a big success. So any questions on that? Jeff Powell has received the checks, and I've been informed that he and his wife intend to thank each donor personally. And Ken and I have sent out emails to all the donors thanking them also. So a very successful campaign, and thank all of you who got involved in that and encouraged your neighbors to contribute. Okay.
Yeah, it was a good result there, Jay. And I also did reach out to Laura Donaldson. She was the attorney that helped us on this matter. Right. And so I just reached out to her and thanked her again and told her how much we had raised, and she sent me a nice note back. So
good. Thanks for covering that base. That's good. Okay, next up, panel ordinances review. David, is there anything further on that?
Yes, on last Tuesday, the Board of County Commissioners unanimously passed our new parking, noise, and golf cart ordinance. The parking ordinance, we will work with the sheriff and the fire department just to put up the appropriate signage near the chapel that will allow a temporary parking during church services, chapel services, and certain holidays. That was requested by the sheriffs because there's no parking on Captiva, but people have been parking there on Sundays for decades, and they just didn't want to turn their head anymore and ignore it because there was arbitrary enforcement. And so we created an ordinance to allow that to continue. Our noise ordinance has passed. The noise ordinance has memorialized the rule that amplified music after 10 o'clock is prohibited. And that's always been the case with our restaurants, et cetera. And they've always honored that, but they always thought that was the rule, but it was never the rule. But now it's the rule. So that's been passed. And any noise, amplified noise or loud noise as defined by the county after 10 p.m., which can be heard clearly from the receiving property at 50 feet will be prohibited. And so you can call the sheriff and that would be enforced. Golf carts, now any companies that are renting golf carts on Captiva will have to advise their customers of what the rules are with golf carts. In other words, what we said before is that 3-year-olds can't be driving golf carts, drinking beer. And they'll have to be notified of that, and there will have to be a sticker on the golf carts setting forth the rules that you have to be a licensed driver, et cetera. And that's, any golf carts that'll be rented. Now we have golf carts coming from Sanibel and Fort Myers, and they don't have any designation on the side of it. You know, YOLO has its name and its telephone number and a number on the golf cart. But a lot of the carts coming from off Sanibel and off Captiva didn't have any identification. Now those golf carts will have to have identification so that if they're doing something that the sheriff sees, at least they know who's responsible for those golf carts. So those three things were passed. We had a fourth ordinance, which was to bring our fertilizer ordinance in conformity with Sanibel's. And just to make the same ordinance on Captiva as Sanibel to make it easier for our landscapers. This is an example of where we have been preempted. Under the state law, you have to have a fertilizer statute which conforms to the state model fertilizer ordinance, unless it was in place many years ago prior to 2008. But anything after 2008, it has to conform to the state model fertilizer ordinance, which is less restrictive than Sanibel or even Lee County at this point. And if you want to change that your ordinance to make it more restrictive than the state ordinance, you have to do two things. You have to have your local ordinance, you have to show as part of a comprehensive program which is science-based and I'm reading, and economically and technically feasible, that additional or more stringent standards than the model ordinances are necessary to address the fertilizer contributions to non-point source nutrient loading of any water body. So that's the first thing you have to do. The second thing you have to do is that we have to show that we have considered all relevant scientific information, including input from the department, the Institute, the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, on the need for additional or more stringent provisions to address fertilizer use to prevent water quality degradation. And then we have to have public hearings before we can make that change. So that's the hoops you have to jump through in order to make your fertilizer ordinance or our fertilizer ordinance more restrictive than the state model. The county didn't want to screw with this because their county existing ordinance on fertilizer, which governs Captiva, is more strict than the state model. And they don't want to change it because they can't go through these hoops at this time. So we basically pulled the fertilizer ordinance and pulled it out because we can't implement it at this time because of state preemption. There was a perfect example of what we were talking about.
Wow. Hard to understand the rationale for.
Yeah.
You say it's the Republicans. Maybe it's just trying to get rid of regulations generally.
Maybe. When I say it's the Republicans, I'm just saying that they control the state house, both houses, the legislature. And, you have to have faith in your local people and your local government and your local elected officials to know what's best for your community.
Yeah.
And I guess there's this unwillingness to believe that people at the local level can make these rules and regulations that serve the community. It's hard to explain.
But David, our fertilizer rules are the same as Sanibel's?
No, right now, as we speak, we have the same as Lee County.
County.
What we sought to do is to make it the same as Sanibel. But Sanibel's regulations were in place prior to 2008, so they're grandfathered. And Lee County's are grandfathered because they were in place prior to 2008. Both Sanibel and Lee County's regulations are more strict than the state model. But if you try to screw with it and change it, then you have to adopt the state model, which is less strict.
Yeah.
Unless you go through these particular hearings and hoops and studies, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But we have the Lee County model is what we can use. Is that correct?
Yes, that is, we have the Lee County ordinance. That's what's in place.
Which is better,
allows- Which is better than the state.
state, but not as good as Sanibel.
Exactly. It allows fertilizer with more nitrogen in it and more phosphorus in it, and allows it to be closer, to be used closer to water bodies than Sanibel, that kind of stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well,
Okay, next up. Vulnerability analysis and proposed direction on Captiva resiliency. Linda, those two topics are yours.
Okay, so on the vulnerability assessment, we have Aptum has submitted one, which is good. We will be reviewing it and hopefully approving it as the vulnerability assessment at the next CEPD meeting. It should be posted on the website, and we will set up a community review of what it says. It's basically saying that we have problems on the Bay side and and some other issues that need to be addressed similarly to what we've had before. It's not earth shattering, but it's similar. The biggest issue I see right now is that recent information has come out that the sea level rise on the Gulf Coast is accelerating. So SCCF is trying to make sense of all of this right now, because in other places it doesn't seem it's going at a much slower rate. So maybe it's a cyclical thing, we could hope, but right now it's taken off at a different curve and it's not good for us. So that's an issue. But on the vulnerability assessment, we've made good progress in terms of what are our vulnerabilities. It's a very comprehensive assessment, including things like hospitals, helicopter pads, all those different parts, as well as where would we flood. The two key factors are sea level rise and tides. Those are the ones. Rain doesn't really play much a part of it. That's a temporal thing that comes and goes. Now that we have that, the big issue is, okay,
Linda, before you move on to the next one, also, I think everybody should understand that having this vulnerability analysis that Aptum did is a necessary step in most grant proposals that you have to have. You have to have a vulnerability analysis that meets, certain requirements for these funding organizations. And the Aptum proposal, as I understand it, covers all those bases.
Yes. And
so not only do we have an understanding of what our vulnerabilities are, we've completed a step that has to be undertaken in any funding we might want to get in the future to implement resiliency plans.
Right. So that's a big step forward for us. As part of that vulnerability assessment, we also ask Aptum to do a legal review to help us understand what our abilities and our authority is to have projects on the Bay side. So they did that, and so far it's not really clear on how best to proceed. We're going to have to work on this in a larger group. The issue is, let's say we want to build a seawall across the whole back of the island on people's property. Who's going to let us do that? How do we go about doing that? Are we taking people's property? So the issue here is you've got all this private property back there, and what can we do? Do we need to get easements everywhere? Instead, could we use ordinances and to encourage people? So how, or even if we have all green solutions, how do we make that happen? And the answer is we don't know at this point. So we're going to work on getting some bigger groups together to try to figure out how have other communities done it and what a good path forward is for us. That will also be, Aptum is we're going to have a phase 2 where we come up with a plan on what to be done, and this obviously will be part of it. Any questions on that?
Well, Linda, I think that, you know, what's the authority of CEPD to act in regard to private property is a major issue. You
Certainly
know,
is.
ultimately, we're going to come up with some sort of resiliency plan to protect the bayside of Captiva. And all that property is privately owned. So what's our ability to implement a resiliency plan? Given that all that private property is owned, can you force people to do it? Can you take land from them? It seems like a very difficult issue to me.
I think it is a difficult.
How are you going to implement a uniform resiliency solution?
Right, and so we're going to have to come up with an overall Captiva coastal plan, and we'll have, there are communities who have done inducements, that's not the right one, but try to help to encourage homeowners to do things in concert with the plan. But it's a tough problem. So and some people perhaps have succeeded, so we've got to work on that. There's places like Cedar Key that's looks like they've done that.
So that's the next step, is to try to find examples of people that have implemented community-wide programs
Right.
involving private property.
Right. So that's a big issue in terms of resilient Captiva. We do have authority to protect against erosion on the bayside. The question is, how do you do it without infringing on individuals' rights? How do you pay for it? How do you do all of that? So it's tricky.
Linda, what did Cedar Key do? Do you know of what their plan was?
They had they have an overall master plan for Tampa Bay, and John, I don't know well enough to tell you.
Okay.
If you'd
Thank
like to be part of this, John.
All right. I'll get with you, Linda.
Okay, we go. So what we're just saying, it's a problem. It's a problem. Okay.
All right, thank you, Linda.
Now let's talk about, I'll talk about the proposed direction for the overall Captiva resiliency.
Okay.
What I want to throw out to you all is we've got, the Bayside is certainly part of it, right? For resilient Captiva, but there's a lot of other things that need to go into it. And I know we have resilient Lee County, and now there's the Sand Cap resiliency thing, but that's a citizens thing, and Sanibel's interests are a little different than ours. So it seems to me that we should be having our own kind of thing where perhaps overall sponsored by the panel, but with subtending plans. So for example, the Bayside part would be the CEPD responsibility. There would be things that would be utilities that perhaps some panel member would own and work with Lee County on. But there's sets of areas that we know. We've got sewers that have to become resilient. There are telecom, there's stormwater, there's the Bayside flooding, and there's a few others. And so I think we probably should be formalizing this a little bit more in terms of us pulling together a overall resilient Captiva plan where we work with the various different organizations, but we have something that is our resiliency plan. And we probably have to have some staff support to pull it all together. So I wanted to throw that out for discussion, see what you all think.
Well, it's a difficult problem. CEPD clearly has authority to develop plans to protect the bayside from sea level rise, increased storming and so forth, but that's just the island perimeter.
Correct.
A big part of resiliency plan is going to be internal also. For example, we know that Plantation Drive has to be raised. Otherwise, South Seas is going to be inaccessible with not too much more, sea level rise than what we've experienced to date. So there's going to be internal aspects to it also. So I don't know how, I can't think of right off how we organize, to develop a total resiliency plan, for Captiva that's going to cover all the bases.
I think we can come up with our needs and then, prioritize our needs as a community and then let them come back with recommendations of how we can get funding, et cetera. And if it means working around with the beach and also on the Back Bay side, maybe that could be some dollars that we get, some grants that we can use to protect for in the future. And but so I think we don't necessarily need to know how we solve them, but we can address what the issues are and then see where it goes from there. What do you think?
Mhm.
I think structurally, the panel is in the best position to be the umbrella organization over resilient Captiva. And I think then within that overall structure, you have CEPD having its authority to do things. South Seas itself, Bob Walter may decide that they can do things. We have a sewer project, which Jay is heading, and that will be part of our resiliency. We now think we're going to get $200,000 to do stormwater design for the village. That's clearly under the panel's auspices. We have if we can put a helicopter pad on top of the firehouse, that would be part of resiliency, but the fire district would work with it. So we would, I think, develop what we call Captiva Resilient or Resilient Captiva, which would dovetail and sort of funnel into Lee County's resiliency plan for Captiva. And then we would have the various responsible organizations playing their role, and all of us working together to try to implement the overarching plan, which different organizations will have different responsibility for. But we will, as a panel, hopefully make sure that all these various elements of the plan are happening, and the various organizations that are responsible for each element of it are doing their job. And I think that's the best way to think about it. We can adjust it as we go. But I think that this panel, just by its existence, basically represents and has representatives of every organization that is going to be part of a resilient Captiva. So I think that's how we should think about it and recognize that we're all working together. Nobody's the boss, but we're going to have a coordinated effort, and the panel will oversee it only because we have representatives of the whole community on the panel. I see it anyway.
Yeah.
Also, I have a question with the Captiva Civic Association. Is the parking lot, let's just say that the fire station doesn't have enough land to do that for their neighbors, et cetera, in the street. But with the Civic Association, the parking lot, if they did a covered structure, is there enough space there for a helicopter landing?
I think that's part of a question that we have to resolve. I have no idea, Sandy. But that is another possibility. I mean, so I think that's all part of what we have to figure out.
Okay, but
there was-
Dave, you
there was
see
an-
this as a panel mission to develop the overall, at least the overall needs.
I think
Yes,
it's the panel's responsibility to coordinate all the elements of the resilient plan. That's how I would put it. And
Sort of
we would have
ensure.
responsibility for certain elements, and other organizations would have responsibility for other elements. But we would, but I think part of the resilient plan is part of planning for Captiva, and that's clearly what the panel does. It does planning for Captiva in conjunction with the county, and I think that's what the county would expect the panel to do. is to make sure that all the elements of a resilient plan is happening or are happening, so that they can help us fund it. And I think that's what Kevin was talking about. He wants a capital improvement plan that lays out all our needs, meaning the county's needs over 5 years. And we have to make sure Captiva's needs are part of that capital improvement plan for the county as a whole.
Okay, how should the panel organize to do this?
I think we're doing it. I think as this thing develops and as we learn about the CEPD's authority, we have the sewer project, we have the stormwater project, which I think will be funded shortly, that Kimley Horn will be doing. I think we need to figure out who's responsible for, we talked about it with Tony Lappi, who's responsible for the south of the bridge, Blind Pass. We begin to put together an outline of all the elements of a resilient Captiva. And at the end of the day, I think with Linda's, direct assistance and with the panel working together, we put together an outline of what a resilient, all the elements that we have to consider to make Captiva resilient. And then we figure out who's doing what. And I think each element will have people who are clearly responsible for it, or organizations responsible. We are, Jay, we're clearly responsible for sewers. We're clearly responsible for stormwater management in the village. I think we're going to have to be clearly responsible for raising the roads in conjunction with Lee County's Department of Transportation. I think CEPD is going to be clearly responsible for preventing erosion on the bayside and for beach renourishment. And I think as we determine there are other areas that we have to tackle to make Captiva resilient, we will have to figure out who's responsible for it, and we'll all work together doing that. But the panel will, I think, put together an outline for the county of everything that's happening that'll make Captiva more resilient.
No, I understand that, but how is the panel going to do this work?
Just the way we've been doing it.
Well,
I think we need an overall plan or document that identifies, all the vulnerabilities.
well,
And
Jay, how about this is for the next meeting, we come up with an outline of the various areas, some of which may be interrelated, and who do we think is responsible for
Right.
it? And that would be, and we'd have this outline of resilient Captiva with responsibilities.
okay, are you in a position to
I can come up with a draft. We can
Okay.
fix it at the meeting. I can come up with a draft easily
Okay.
enough.
Right, and Sandy and I can work with Linda on this. We're part of Resilient Lee. We have a sense of what they're looking for. And we can make sure that at least we're speaking the same language, meaning the Captiva Resilient Plan is speaking the same language as the Lee plan, so that we will be in the best position to get funding for the various elements that we need have to be accomplished.
Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, in the interim here, to get this thing off the ground, it's going to be Linda and David are going to try to.
Sandy?
Did Sandy just disappear from the meeting?
No, she's shaking her head yes, sure. Work.
Okay.
I was muted because there was some noise going on in my office, but no, that would be great. We just have the list together, then we can try to put it.
I'll get us together and come up with a draft and we can.
Sure. Because there's like an infrastructure committee. And so as a result, things that would be related to infrastructure would go to them but resiliency and the overall capacity and planning, I think pretty much everything, whether it be the environmental, and we're all intersecting, also like the workforce housing, that kind of intersects with planning. So it's pretty much going to come across our committee at some point anyway. So we'll just kind of figure that one out once we know what the needs are.
Yeah, Jay, I think if you think about it this way, our Captiva community plan, gets updated every 5, 6, 7 years, et cetera. And I think that we can think about, having a section of our amended Captiva community plan, which is part of the LEAP plan, which would have a section on resilience. And
Yeah.
section on resilience, which would be part of our plan, would lay out all the work that we have to do, the goals we have, the objectives, and who's responsible for those various things. Just like the plan now says that the CEPD is responsible for beach renourishment. We'll be able to amend our plan to create a resilient Captiva as part of the plan.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Linda, further comments on that?
No. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Linda. Okay, Captiva Drive, vegetation and bike lanes. Yeah, I guess a number of people have been working on that. John, do you want to take that one? I know David's been doing a lot of work on it also.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Jay. I know, watching, landscapers, there's a lot of activity, people landscaping. I know they're some of them are pushing that 2-foot buffer zone. But I think people need to understand rocks are included. Rocks along with vegetation are included in that buffer zone.
It should not be in the buffer zone.
Right, we have that 2-foot buffer zone off the edge of the bike path. And I've contacted a couple homeowners, just letting them know, but I think we did send out that one letter. I think maybe resending that letter would help.
Well, I think Lee County's got to get their letter out.
Jay, you're totally right. We need that letter out ASAP from the county.
I spoke to the county about this, and I asked Ken Gooderham also to do that. And let me give you an update, the status of it. We sent out an email to our email list of about 950 people who actually opened the email. And because we can see who opens the emails, and they've been advised of the rules. I think that we should send out, and I would ask the panel to agree to this. I think we should amend our letter, basically advise using the same letter that was emailed, but send it out by snail mail to every property owner along Captiva Drive, and not in the South Seas. So it won't be that hard, that expensive. And we should explain in the letter that this is the rule, this is the ordinance, just like we did before, but that also rocks and stones and the lava rocks cannot be in the 2-foot right of way, 2-foot zone just along the shoulder. I have spoken to the county. The county next week or the week after is going to be sending their crew out, and they are going to either cut anything within that 2-foot zone outside by the shoulder, and where there are bushes that they don't want to cut, they are going to send a letter, certified letter to that property owner, giving them 2 or 3 weeks to move back either the vegetation or the stones that are next to the shoulder. And if they don't do that within a 2 or 3 week period, the county is going to remove them, either the bushes and the stones. The county believes that the stones is a liability to it. If they think they're dangerous along the shoulder and they should not be in the county right of way, basically, which it is. And therefore, they're going to ask property owners to move those stones back 2 feet from the edge of the pavement. And if they don't, they're going to remove them. But I think that we as a panel should send out a letter ourselves, again, just telling our property owners that this is what the county is going to do and that they should voluntarily do it in a way that they're comfortable with prior to the county taking their own steps and their own action in doing so. So
Well, is the county no longer planning to send out a mass mailing to all Captiva property owners?
it sounds like it sounds like what they want to do is, I think they believe what we sent out is sufficient, but they will send out a certified letter to everybody on Captiva Drive who they believe, who the county in violation, yes. And then they will send out a second letter also telling them that it's going to be, they're going to remove it themselves, meaning the county. But I think as a panel, we should just send something out directly by snail mail also, so that we've done as best we could to advise people in what the county's going to do. And I told Ken I would be willing just to add a paragraph to our existing letter, just mentioning the stone and the liability piece of that the county's concerned about, and asking people to move everything back 2 feet from the edge of the pavement. I think a lot of the landscapers have been doing that voluntarily, but we have some landscapers who are not from Captiva who have no idea. And we have property owners who are not here. And I think that, and maybe we don't have their email addresses, but we do have their addresses. So I think it behooves us to send that out. And if it costs us $50 or $100 to do it in stamps,
No big deal.
yeah, I think we should do it.
David, I agree with everything you said, except I really think some property owners may not read or respond to our panel's letters where the county, they may be more receptive to opening it and reading it. So I would still encourage you to see if you could get the county to go ahead and send out a letter.
Yeah, I spoke to them about it, Ken, and they don't want to send out 1,000 letters when they have, 18 violators or 7 violators on Captiva Drive. So they're actually sending out the people who are going to get addresses of people where there are violators. They're going to send out a letter specifically to those property owners, which I get the same purpose.
I understand the reluctance. Yesterday, Karen and I took a walk down to Yacht Club and back, and on the Gulf side, we still have a lot of debris and sand as a result of the Hurricane Ian. Who do you think's going to be responsible for getting us 2 feet on that side of Captiva Drive?
You're saying the sand that goes right up to the shoulder?
Yes.
Yeah. The county will clear it.
The county's going to clear it. Okay.
Yeah, they're going to clear, what they told me, they're going to clear 2 feet off the shoulder everywhere.
On both sides.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And they're still coming around twice a year. That's the point.
That they will commit, and we put it in writing, they will commit to 2 times a year, but I suspect if they need to, they'll be around more.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so David, you and Ken are gonna get this letter out, is that?
Yeah, I would like approval of the panel just to approve that we can send out a letter to, I guess we'll make the letter go to the smallest number of people who we can siphon off and see would be affected by the Captiva Drive ordinance or code.
Yes.
And I'm happy to amend the letter that went out already, which was a fine letter. And we should just add a section letting them know what the county is going to do, and also that stones should be set back 2 feet also. The county about the stones.
David, question, you're doing all, the landscapers would, we got what, 5 or 6 landscapers that do work? Where are they notified, or should we send them a picture and say, this is not what you want to do? I don't know. It's just a thought for the landscapers to have kind of nothing like a visual for them to sort of see, because if they're not going to read the ordinance or read what it is, or maybe just if you send them a picture, I just a thought.
Yeah, okay, we can do that. Ken, you heard that. Let's see if we can do that. Maybe we can stick it in with the letter. Or we can, we can get the names. It'll just see the problem, Tony, is that there are, I guess we get the name of landscapers. The ones that we know of is easy, and they know about it already because they've been spoken with. There are landscapers now coming for the first time or second time on Captiva that haven't been here before. And we need to get Ken the names of those landscapers. So if anybody has names of landscapers, if they could just email them to Ken, then we can get out a letter to them also.
I'll
Okay.
take a picture of the truck if I see one.
Right, we can
Yeah.
get a picture of the truck, right?
Okay.
Jay, could you just ask the panel if they agree to send out that letter?
Oh, yeah, right. Do you want to formulate the motion, David? that you
Yeah,
want?
I'd like to make a motion that the panel approve a letter sent out by regular mail to those properties that are affected by the land development code requiring 2 feet of a zone behind the pavement. So that the property owners have a sense of what the county is going to do over the next couple of months.
Can I have
Okay.
a second, please?
I'll second. All right.
Any further discussion? All in favor of sending this letter? Aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on, wastewater update. As I have explained before, this project is in Sanibel's hands now. They have to complete 2 consulting studies before we can move forward on these. One is figuring out what they will do with the increased processed wastewater that will result from them processing our wastewater. And then number 2, an economic analysis leading to what charges they should make to property owners for accessing the Donax facility. I have tried to follow up with Dana Souza to get a status on where these projects are. Thus far, I've not gotten any feedback from Dana. I know he's an incredibly busy man with all of the issues that Sanibel is working on. So I have not gotten a response to him, even though I have followed him a couple of times. So hopefully in the not too distant future, I'll get an understanding of where we are on those 2 consulting projects and how long they're going to take and so forth. But that's where we are right now. After we get that, the next big step is going to be trying to make some kind of accurate determination of what kind of public assistance we're going to get for this project, which in turn will lead to how much of the bill property owners are going to have to pay to for us to establish a collection system that hooks up to Sanibel's system. That's my report on that. Any questions?
No.
Okay,
Yeah, I think the key thing here is we want to get this done quick enough so that we can be part of Commissioner Ruane's CIP, the capital improvement plan. And we want to be as big a part of that capital improvement plan as we possibly can be.
Right. Absolutely.
Mm.
Okay, next up, Stormwater Committee. Linda, you're back on the floor.
On stormwater, I've been hearing that we may be getting funding for our engineering study. I don't know if David has an update on that. And once we have it, we're going to work on the proposal, get a few things taken care of, and off we go.
Okay, I think we have a solid commitment from Commissioner Ruane that he's going to get the study funded
Okay.
for us. We have a final study design from Kimley Horn.
We do. It just needs to be tweaked in a couple of spots. And then we, actually the county has it, but it needs to be tweaked. We've contacted Kimley Horn about it. We got to set up a meeting just to make those final changes and get it approved. But it's not a major bunch of tweaks, but there's a couple of tweaks.
Okay.
We also discussed and I believe decided that we're going to see if we can get SCCF to sponsor a series of workshops for both Captiva and Sanibel on what the individual homeowner can do to reduce the runoff from their property and improve the stormwater management on their property. And this would be very much at the individual level rather than at any kind of governmental level.
So the plan is the village will have a stormwater management system put in place outside the village. there'll be direction given to each property owners as to what they can best do to manage their own stormwater runoff.
And even within the village, we can do things on our own properties to manage our runoff and our stormwater.
Okay,
So that's what we're doing.
okay, iguanas, John Jensen, anything to report on that? Is Alfredo getting rid of these critters?
Yeah, yeah, he's out here today and he's been getting them every week. He said he's been doing really good. So he's on track. I don't know. I haven't noticed a whole lot of them running around, so I think he's pecking away at it.
Okay. All right, any other committees or reports that we need? Okay, Ken, can you take us through the numbers briefly?
Oh, you have the breakdown in your handout. As you can see, we're doing fine on fundraising so far. And our costs are running below our projections. So we'll be fine over the summer and we can talk about whether we need to do any fundraising in the fall.
Okay, but clearly we have enough cash to do everything this year that we want to do.
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other panel members, comments, questions?
There is one thing I wanted to mention, and I should have mentioned it before when Ruane was on. There's a good likelihood you will have a Natural Resources Committee meeting on Captiva on April 21st as part of the the task force. They wanted to bring people out to the island so they could get to see Ian's destruction up close and personal. So they're setting the meeting at the CCA.
Okay.
Right now, the plan is to have it on Friday, the 21st at 10:30. It will be the Natural Resources Group meeting. Public is invited. I don't know that they've got an
This is
agenda
the
put together.
Natural Resources branch of the Resilient Lee.
Task force, yes.
Of course, yes, okay.
So
I trust
may-
you will put out a notice to that, you know, to our email list.
yes, I'm kind of waiting to see if they have an agenda so that I can tell people what the topics will be, but we'll get something out before it happens.
Okay, do we have any audience comments or questions?
No.
Okay, I guess we have completed the agenda. If nobody else has anything, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
A
Yep,
second.
second.
Does anybody want to have extensive discussion about adjourning the meeting?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll see you all next month. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Jay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
everyone. All right, bye.
Thanks, Jay.